Shalom and welcome back. So in this video, we are going to talk about Yahweh. What you see on your screen is what Yahweh looks like in Hebrew. And when I learned what this name of God meant, this is his personal name, not a title, it really was life-changing for me, and I hope it's life-changing for you too. Now, last time we were together, we talked about A.W. Tozer and his belief that what comes to mind when we think about God is the most important thing about us. And I really believe that that's true. Do we believe that this God that we worship, is he knowable? Can we know him in an experiential way? And so that's the question before us today. And to answer that, we're going to take a look at one of my very favorite biblical characters, and that's Moses. Moses has several really significant theophanies with God. Now, a theophany is a Greek word that means God appearance. Theo, God, phany, appearance. So we're going to take a look at some of the ways God revealed himself to Moses and see what we can learn. We're going to begin in Exodus 3, and we're going to move all the way kind of through that to 4:17. And so let's get started. Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you.' And they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. 'I am has sent me to you.'" God also said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, 'Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I am to be remembered from generation to generation. Go, assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you, and I have seen what has been done to you in Egypt." So this is Moses's introduction to the God of the universe. It's a pretty dramatic one. And this is the very first time that the name Yahweh is used in a text with Moses. And so this is a great opportunity for us to learn what this name means. The second time that God appears to Moses, this is in 33:12-18. Moses says to Yahweh, "You have been telling me, lead these people, but you've not let me know who you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways so that I might know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people." So Moses had been given the very difficult task of taking a ragtag bunch of slaves from Egypt, molding them into a nation, and making them a people after God's own heart. So here, Moses is kind of bargaining with God, saying, "This is what you've told me to do, but you haven't told me if you're going to go with me or not." And so this is what Yahweh says. He says, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Then Moses said to him, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you're pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth?" And Yahweh said to Moses, "I will do the very thing you've asked, because I'm pleased with you and I know you by name." Then Moses said, "Now show me your glory." This is probably my favorite passage in Scripture. Here we have a mortal man, and we kind of get to pull back the curtain and see his interior life with God. First, we see his hunger for God. He says, I want your presence to go with me. I don't want an angel. I don't want your hand or your blessing. I want you. I want all of you. And then we see how audacious Moses is when it comes to his relationship with God. Because at the very end, he says, okay, so you've promised him with me. Is that enough for Moses? He takes it one whole step further and says, now show me your glory. This always challenges me in my relationship with God. What am I settling for? Is there more? Can I know him more? And so Moses is a wonderful companion to walk through, kind of a mentor, to see him as a mentor in our relationship with God. Now, the interesting thing to notice is that when this word, my presence, is used in the text, in our English text, it says my presence. But in the Hebrew, the word is panai, and it means my face. So what Moses is really asking for is, and what God gives him is his very face. And I just think that's fabulous. So let's see how turns out for Moses, this incredibly audacious request. So in Exodus 33:19 through 23, this is what we learn. And Yahweh said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name Yahweh in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Then Yahweh said, there's a place near me where you can stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock and cover you with my hand until I pass by. Then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. So I just love this. Here's God responding to Moses' absolutely audacious request. And when Moses says, show me your glory, this is how God responds. I will cause my goodness, all of my goodness, to pass in front of you. So when we think about God's glory, that's what it is. His glory is all of his goodness. And well, that's first. And then second, God reveals his personal name. I will proclaim my name, Yahweh, in your presence. So what does Moses do? He goes and he chisels out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and he went up on Mount Sinai early in the morning as Yahweh had commanded him, and he carried the 2 stone tablets in his hands. Then Yahweh came down in a cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, Yahweh. And he passed in front of Moses proclaiming, Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshipped. So, God is revealed in and through this name Yahweh. So, the importance of names in the ancient Near East cannot be underestimated. Historically, a name would represent the character and the very essence of the human being. Like today, our names are just labels. Like my name is Sue. But back in the ancient Near East, this was very different. People were named for their essence, for what represented their character. So the difference between this name and all of Yahweh's titles is significant. Yahweh, his personal name, is saying that I am dynamically present. And an example of the titles, again, are El, Elohim, El Shaddai, El Elyon, El Olam, and Adonai. These aren't actually his names. These are titles that God has given himself. So let's take a look at the etymology of God's personal name. Like I said in a previous video, if you see the capital L, capital O, capital R, and capital D in the text, that is the word Yahweh. It's a verbal form derived from the root hua, later hue, to be at hand, to exist phenomenally, to come to pass. So what God is telling us is he is a dynamic sense of being, not pure existence, but becoming, happening. He is presence. He is present with us. It's not like the omnipresence we think of when we think of God. This is a personal presence. And this difference is significant because we can know that if we look around the room where we said that God's present, we know that he's omnipresent. But his name tells us and takes us deeper into the story that Yahweh is present with you. He's like in your face present. Yahweh is present to you. Yahweh is present in you. And Yahweh is present for you. Acts 17:28 tells us, "For in him we live and move and have our being." And then Matthew 28:20 says, "And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." So when I learned this, it was a game changer for me. And I learned to practice his presence. Do you know that your mind wanders every 6 to 11 seconds? It used to be 11 seconds. Now it's 6 seconds. And if we could train our mind that every time our mind wanders, it wanders to the fact that God, the God of the universe, Yahweh himself is with us, man, puts a whole new spin on life. 2 Corinthians 3:18 tells us, "But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory, the goodness of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit." It was about this time that I came across a wonderful little book called The Practice of the Presence of God, which you're actually going to be more acquainted with later on this week. His name is Brother Lawrence. He's a monk who wrote it. He lived in between 1614 and 1691. And Brother Lawrence had this amazingly humble, beautiful faith where he would just walk through his day in the presence of God, living in that presence, whether he was worshiping or praying, doing dishes or peeling potatoes. He learned how to practice the presence of God. Now, I remember a few years ago, I was doing a retreat for a bunch of actually they were senior high girls. And I was teaching them this concept of what God's name meant, what Yahweh meant. That I was telling them God is with you and he's with you always. And all of a sudden, this silence filled the room. And I realized something else was going on here. And then one of the girls piped up and she said, "That is the scariest thing I've ever heard." They were terrified at the thought that God was with them. And I think that's why in the verse that we looked at, God goes on to explain more about his character. The dynamic presence of God is love. It says, "Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin." So let's unpack this a little. The thought that the God of the universe is with us all the time can be a little scary until we realize who it is that's with us. So first, God tells us that he is compassionate. And compassion is defined as the deep feeling of sharing the suffering of another in the inclination to give aid, to show support, or show mercy. So when God looks at us, when he's with us, he's here to show compassion, to show mercy, to aid us in our life. Also, it says that God is gracious. And gracious is characterized by kindness and warmth, with a courtesy, that God treats us with courtesy. Next, it says that God is slow to anger. So he's slow or requiring a very long time to get angry. He is not an angry God, as so often we hear. He is a loving God. It says that he is abounding. That means to be great in amount, teeming, overflowing. He's also abounding in love. Love, an intense, affectionate concern for another. And faithfulness, adhering strictly to the person, cause, or idea to which one is bound. He is bound to us. He is faithful in love. So maybe, hopefully, thinking about the fact that God is present with us has a very different feel to it when we remember that God is with us to love us. So let's remember what love is, right? 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. So if God is love, if Yahweh is love, then we can put his name in there as well. Yahweh is patient. Yahweh is kind. Yahweh does not envy. He does not boast, is not proud. Yahweh does not dishonor others. He is not self-seeking, is not easily angered. Yahweh keeps no record of wrongs. Yahweh does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Yahweh always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres, because Yahweh never fails. I think what we can deduce from this is that Yahweh is dynamically present to love you. He is present with you to love you. He's present to you to love you. He is present in you to love you. He is present for you to love you. How do I know this? Because 1 John 4:16 tells us, because God is love. So what about us? We're not Moses. I'm nobody special. Does God really love me? Does God really want to be with me in the same way he wanted to be with Moses? Well, 2 Corinthians 3:7 tells us yes. Now, if the ministry that brought death, which was engraved in letters on stone, came with glory, so that the Israelites could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of its glory fading though it was, will not the ministry of the Spirit be even more glorious? If the ministry that condemns men is glorious, how much more glorious is the ministry that brings righteousness? For what was glorious has no glory now in comparison with the surpassing glory. And if what was fading away came with glory, how much greater is the glory of that which lasts? Therefore, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. So now, what about us? We've seen that we are told over and over and over again in the scripture to seek God. If we seek him, we will find him. And we also know that the New Testament tells us that if we ask, it will be given to us. If we seek, we will find. If we knock, the door will be open to us. So here's what I've learned to do, which has really changed my life. And that is to learn to practice God's presence. So my mind, as it would wander every, 6 to 11 seconds, I try to train it to wander, to think about the fact that God is with me. And so I engage him in prayer. And this is the way that 2 Corinthians tells us that we are transformed into his image. And I highly recommend the reading that you're going to have later this week with Brother Lawrence. It's a very short book. It is really worth your while. But it talks about his journey of learning how to practice God's presence all the time. one of the things that I've done that has been really helpful is I've created a love journal. I put really all of the verses about the love of God in a journal, and I meditate on them regularly so I can remember that the God of the universe is a God of love, and He is present to love me. Well, until next time, Shalom.